I'm Olivia, 28, female, and my parents just tried to steal nearly $15,000 from me to take my brother on a luxury vacation to Greece. They thought I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. For as long as I can remember, my family has operated on a two-tier system. There was the tier for my younger brother, Josh, and then there was the tier for me. Josh lived in a world of cushioned landings, endless support, and minimal expectations. My world was one of self-sufficiency, quiet responsibility, and the constant, unspoken understanding that my needs came second. My parents, Carol and Richard, weren't overtly cruel. Their brand of favoritism was more insidious, woven into the very fabric of our family finances and expectations. It was a slow drip of emotional and financial neglect that I had become so accustomed to, I almost stopped noticing it. The first time the disparity became glaringly obvious was when I turned 17. I lived in a suburban town where a car wasn't a luxury, but a necessity to get to a part-time job, which I needed to save for college. My parents made it clear that if I wanted wheels, I had to earn them. And so I did. I spent an entire summer working at a local diner, the scent of stale coffee and grease clinging to my clothes every night. I saved every single dollar, and by the end of August, I proudly bought a 10-year-old sedan. It was rusted in places, and the air conditioning was more of a suggestion than a feature, but it was mine. I had earned it. 3 years later, it was Josh's 17th birthday. There was no talk of summer jobs or saving up. Instead, my parents sat him down at the kitchen table with brochures for new cars. They co-signed a loan for a brand new, sporty coupe that cost more than my first 2 years of community college tuition combined. Their justification: Josh needs something reliable, Olivia. We don't want him stranded on the side of the road. The implication, of course, was that my potential stranding was an acceptable risk. The real sting came 6 months later when my mother called me. Josh, who was working a few hours a week at a video game store, was struggling with the car payments. We were wondering if you could just help him out for a few months, Mom had said, her voice dripping with sweet persuasion. You're so good with money. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation. For the next year, a portion of my paycheck, money I was saving to transfer to a 4-year university, went directly to paying for my brother's reliable car. He never once thanked me. The second defining incident was the Great College Fund debacle. My parents had always spoken of a modest savings account they had set up for our education. When it was my time to go to college, I learned that modest was the operative word. It was enough to cover my books and a fraction of my first year's tuition at a local community college. I was grateful for it, and I took out loans to cover the rest, accepting it as my reality. I worked through school, determined to graduate with as little debt as possible. When it was Josh's turn, the story changed. He had no interest in traditional college. Instead, he had a series of brilliant business ideas. First, it was a high-end streetwear brand for which he needed startup capital. Then, it was an app for rating local coffee shops. Each venture required a significant investment. I watched from the sidelines as the remainder of the college fund, and then some, was poured into his fleeting passions. My father would rationalize it, saying, "You have to support an entrepreneurial spirit, Olivia. Josh is a big-picture thinker." The streetwear brand resulted in 100 unsold t-shirts stored in their garage. The app never made it past a poorly designed landing page. The college fund was gone, and Josh had nothing to show for it but a reinforced belief that he didn't need to follow through on anything because he would always be bailout out. This pattern of loaning me out to support Josh's lifestyle became the norm. My parents would call with urgent, whispered requests for money. "The property tax bill is higher than we expected," my dad would say. "Your mother needs a new washing machine." I was a software engineer, and while I wasn't wealthy, I was stable. I lived simply, diligently paying off my student loans and building my savings. Because I was responsible, they saw me as a resource. The loans were never paid back. They were absorbed into the black hole of my family's finances. Yet when Josh's birthday or Christmas rolled around, my parents would spare no expense, buying him the latest gaming console or designer clothes. If I ever gently pointed out the hypocrisy, my mother would get a wounded look in her eyes. "It's different, honey," she'd say. "We're his parents. We're supposed to spoil him a little." So 2 months ago, when my parents announced they were having a quiet, frugal summer at home, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. They saw me down for our weekly Sunday dinner, a ritual I dreaded but felt obligated to attend. "We've just been looking at our finances," my mother, Carol, said, pushing a piece of dry pot roast around her plate. "Things are a bit tight. We've decided to cancel any travel plans. It'll be a staycation for us this year. Just some gardening, maybe fix up the porch." My father, Richard, nodded grimly. "That's right. Time to tighten the belt. It's the responsible thing to do." Josh, who was scrolling on his phone, piped up without looking. "Boring." "It's not boring, Josh," my mother snapped, though without any real heat. "It's what responsible adults do." Part of me felt a familiar pang of guilt. Here I was, with a comfortable salary and a growing backup savings account, and my parents were clipping coupons. The other, more cynical part of me felt an immense sense of relief. A summer without any sudden, desperate calls for money, for a last-minute getaway we just couldn't pass up, sounded like a vacation for me, too. "Well, that sounds nice and relaxing, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "If things are tight, let me know. I can help out with the grocery bills for a bit." My mother's face brightened instantly. "Oh, Olivia, you are such a good daughter. We couldn't possibly ask." But she didn't have to ask. The expectation was already hanging in the air. I went home that night and set up a recurring transfer of a few $100s to her bank account, labeling it groceries. I felt like I was doing the right thing. I felt like the responsible daughter they always said I was. I had no idea that my generosity was being interpreted as stupidity. I didn't realize that their performance of poverty was just the curtain rising on the greatest betrayal of my life. The 2 months that followed were strangely peaceful. True to their word, my parents didn't ask for a single thing. My weekly dinners with them became almost pleasant. They talked about the new mulch they'd laid in the garden and the old movies they were watching on TV. My father was fixing a loose board on the porch, and my mother was trying a new recipe for pickles. It all sounded so wholesome, so domestic. The guilt I'd felt earlier began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. Maybe they had finally turned a corner. Maybe they were finally learning to live within their means. I found myself enjoying the lack of financial anxiety. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when my phone rang and I saw Mom or Dad on the screen. Our conversations were light. I'd call while walking home from work, and my mother would tell me about her day in the placid, unhurried tones of someone with nowhere to be. "Oh, it was just another day in paradise," she said during one such call, her voice laced with a theatrical sigh. "Your father and I spent the afternoon weeding the petunias. It's not the French Riviera, but I suppose it has its own charm." "The French Riviera is overrated," I replied with a laugh. "Think of all the money you're saving." "Oh, don't I know it," she said. "Every penny counts these days. Your brother is another story, of course. He's so bored he started rearranging the furniture. He complains there's nothing to do." "He could get a job," I suggested, my voice turning a little cooler. "Now, Olivia, be nice," she chided gently. "He's sensitive, he's trying to find his passion. You were always so focused." It was the classic narrative of our family. I was focused, he was passionate. I was practical, he was a dreamer. I was the sturdy workhorse, he was the delicate show pony. I let the comment slide. It wasn't worth the argument. The peace was too precious to disrupt over the same old disagreement. During this time, I threw myself into my work. My team was on a tight deadline for a major project launch, and I welcomed the distraction. I worked long hours, fueled by coffee and the satisfaction of solving complex coding problems. I was building a life for myself, one line of code at a time. The stability I craved was finally within my grasp. I had a solid career, a nice apartment that was my sanctuary, and a clear plan to pay off the last of my student loans by the end of the year. I felt in control. My apartment was my refuge from the world. It was a minimalist space, decorated in cool tones of gray and blue, Everything had its place. It was the antithesis of my parents' house, which was cluttered with decades of impulse buys and the ghosts of Josh's failed business ventures. Here, there was order. There was logic. I could breathe. One Saturday, I decided to visit my parents unannounced, bringing a peace offering of pastries from a fancy bakery near my apartment. As I pulled into their driveway, I saw them in the front yard, just as they'd described. My father was meticulously trimming the hedges, and my mother was watering a row of blooming rose bushes. They looked like a portrait of suburban contentment. "Olivia," my mother exclaimed. Her face breaking into a wide, genuine-looking smile. "What a surprise." "I brought croissants," I said, holding up the bag. We sat on the porch, the very porch my father had supposedly been repairing, and ate the pastries. They seemed happy, relaxed. Josh was nowhere to be seen. "He's at a friend's house," my father explained, "probably complaining about how dull his life is." We talked for over an hour. They asked about my project at work, and I explained it to them in the simplest terms I could. They nodded along, feigning interest. Looking back, I can see the cracks in their performance. My mother's eyes kept darting towards the front door, as if she were expecting a delivery. My father seemed jittery, tapping his fingers on the arm of his chair. But at the time, I interpreted it as restlessness from their new, slower-paced life. "Well, we should let you go," my mother said eventually, standing up abruptly. "You're a busy woman. We're just boring old homebodies now." She gave me a hug, holding on for a moment longer than usual. "We're so proud of you, Olivia," she whispered in my ear. "You're so responsible, so independent." The words warmed me. It was rare to get such direct praise. It felt like a validation of all my hard work, of all the sacrifices I had made. I drove home feeling a sense of profound peace. I felt like I finally had the relationship with my parents that I'd always wanted, one based on mutual respect, not on my utility as their personal bank. I was so blissfully, devastatingly wrong. The quiet wasn't peace. It was the eerie calm before a hurricane makes landfall. They weren't proud of my independence. They were counting on it. They were counting on me to be too busy, too focused, and too trusting to ever look over my shoulder. It was a Tuesday night. Just after 11 p.m., the project at work had finally launched, and I was celebrating with a quiet evening at home. I'd ordered my favorite takeout, poured myself a glass of wine, and was settling onto the couch to watch a movie. The stress of the past few weeks had melted away, leaving a pleasant hum of exhaustion and accomplishment. My apartment was dark, save for the blue glow of the television screen. I felt utterly content. My phone, resting on the coffee table, buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a work email or a message from a friend. Instead, it was a notification from a banking app I barely used. Bank alert. A transaction of $14,750 has been processed from your secure savings account. I stared at the screen, my brow furrowed in confusion. $14,750. From my secure savings account. That couldn't be right. That was my emergency backup fund, an account I hadn't touched in years. It was an old account my mother had helped me open when I was 16, back when you needed a parent cosigner. I hadn't thought about it in ages, except to see the balance grow slowly from the automatic transfers I'd set up. I never made withdrawals. Never. My first thought was that it was a mistake, a glitch in the system, or worse, a hack. My heart began to beat a little faster. I put my wine glass down, the movie on the screen now forgotten. My hands felt clammy as I picked up the phone and opened the banking app. I had to reset the password, fumbling with the security questions. Who was my childhood best friend? What was the name of my first pet? It felt like an eternity before I was finally in. I navigated to the secure savings account. My eyes scanned the transaction history, and there it was, stark and undeniable. Pending transaction. Merchant, Elysian Travel and Tour. Details: Mykonos luxury package, flights, suite, private driver. Mykonos, I had never even looked at pictures of Mykonos. Elysian Travel and Tour, I had never heard of them. The blood drained from my face. I felt a cold, prickling sensation spread across my skin. This was real. Someone had accessed my account and booked an absurdly extravagant vacation. But who, how? The account was supposed to be secure. The only other person who had ever been on the account was my mother, and she'd been removed as a co-signer years ago when I turned 18. Or so I had thought. Had she kept the old account information, could she have guessed my password? My mind was a whirlwind of frantic questions. I felt a rising tide of panic. My hands were trembling as I thought about the phone call I would have to make to the bank's fraud department. I felt violated. The sanctity of my quiet, orderly life had been shattered. And then, as if on cue, my phone screen lit up with another notification. A text message from Josh. My heart gave a painful lurch. Why was he texting me so late? I opened the message and the world stopped. Josh, she never reads her statements, don't worry. The tickets are confirmed. Can't wait. I read it once, then a second time, then a third. The words swam before my eyes, then sharpened into a horrifyingly clear pic. It's your. She. He wasn't talking about some random person. He was talking about me. Don't worry. They had conspired, they had planned this, they had counted on my inattention. The tickets are confirmed. The $14,750, the luxury trip to Mykonos. It wasn't for a stranger, it was for them, for my parents and my brother. My mother, with her talk of gardening and clipping coupons. My father, with his lectures on fiscal responsibility. My brother, the golden child, about to be whisked away on a 5-star vacation funded by my life savings. The panic I'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by something else. It was a feeling so cold and sharp it was almost paralyzing. It was pure, undiluted fury. The betrayal was so profound, so brazen, it felt like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The air in my apartment suddenly felt thick and suffocating. Every memory of the last 2 months replayed in my mind, but now they were cast in a sickening new light. My mother's feigned pride, my father's talk of tightening his belt, their whole performance of humble poverty. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed charade designed to lower my guard while they plotted to steal from me. My hands stopped shaking. A strange, chilling calm settled over me. I knew exactly what I had to do. I took a screenshot of the bank transaction, the damning evidence of their theft. Then I took a screenshot of Josh's text message, the proof of their intent. I opened my messaging app, created a new message to Josh, and attached the 2 screenshots. I didn't type a long, angry paragraph. I didn't hurl accusations or insults. I let the evidence speak for itself. Below the images, I typed 2 simple words. Me, read this. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. The calm I felt was the calm of a general before a battle. I had been attacked. My sanctuary had been breached, and I was about to fight back with everything I had. The silence after I sent the text was deafening. I imagined Josh's phone lighting up, his casual confidence turning to stone-cold panic as he saw what he had done. I imagined him scrambling to call our mother, the frantic, whispered conversation that would follow. Good. Let them panic. Let them feel a fraction of the violation I was feeling. I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing they could say that would matter. An apology would be a lie, an excuse an insult. Their actions had spoken for them, and now mine would speak for me. My fingers moved with precision as I navigated to my bank's website and found the number for the 24/7 fraud department. The phone felt cool and solid in my hand. I pressed the call button and listened to the rings, my jaw clenched. Thank you for calling the Fraud Prevention Center. My name is Maria. How can I help you tonight? The voice on the other end was calm and professional. Hello, Maria, I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. My name is Olivia. I need to report a fraudulent transaction on my savings account. I gave her my name and account number. As she pulled up my details, I stared out the window of my dark apartment at the city lights twinkling in the distance. They seemed a million miles away. Okay, Olivia, I see your account here, Maria said. Can you tell me which transaction you're concerned about? There's a pending charge for $14,750, I said, the number tasting like poison in my mouth. The merchant is listed as Elysian Travel and Tour. I see that here, she confirmed. Booked earlier today, a luxury package to Greece. Did you authorize this charge, ma'am? No, I did not, I said, the words sharp and clear. I have never heard of that travel company. I was at home alone when that transaction was made. I understand. And you still have your bank card in your possession. I don't even have a physical card for that account, I explained. It's a digital savings account. I haven't accessed it myself in over a year. A pause on the other end of the line. Okay, Maria said slowly. This is a significant amount, so we'll need to open a full investigation immediately. The first step is to freeze the account to prevent any further unauthorized activity. Do you agree to this? Yes, I said without hesitation. Freeze it, freeze everything. Done, the account is now frozen. The pending charge for $14,750 will be suspended, and we will initiate a chargeback with the merchant. They will be notified that the transaction is being disputed as fraudulent. We will also permanently close the compromised account number and help you set up a new one. Do you understand? I do, I said. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The merchant will be notified. Elysian Travel and Tour. They would cancel the tickets. They would cancel the hotel suites and the private driver. The fantasy vacation, bought with my money and their lies, would evaporate into thin air. Then Maria asked the question I knew was coming. Olivia, do you have any idea who might have accessed your account information? It's often someone known to the victim. This was the moment of truth. I could be vague. I could pretend I had no idea, or I could take the final, irrevocable step. I thought of my mother's hug, her whisper of being proud of my independence. I thought of Josh's careless text. Yes, I said, my voice low but unwavering. I have a very strong suspicion. It's a family matter. I'm very sorry to hear that, Maria said, her tone softening with professional sympathy. For the purpose of the investigation, would you be willing to name the individuals? I hesitated for only a second. Did I want to bring the full weight of a banking investigation down on them? Did I want to risk them facing legal consequences? Yes, I did. They had gambled and they had lost. Actions have consequences. This was a lesson they were long overdue to learn. My mother, Carol, I said, the name feeling foreign. My father, Richard, and my brother, Josh. They were the only people who could have possibly had access to my old information. Thank you for your honesty, Olivia. I know this is difficult. I've noted it all down. A case manager will be in touch with you within the next few business days to follow up. For now, your money is protected. We finished the call and I hung up. I sank back onto my couch, the phone dropping from my hand. It was done. The gears were in motion. I had set off a bomb and it was ticking. I knew with absolute certainty that the fallout would be catastrophic. The relationship I had with my family, already strained and imbalanced, was now fractured beyond repair. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch in the dark, watching the sun begin to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. I felt hollowed out, empty. But underneath the emptiness, a new feeling was taking root. It was a feeling of resolve. For my entire life, I had been the shock absorber for my family's dysfunction. I had been the responsible one, the stable one, the one who cleaned up their messes and subsidized their irresponsibility. I had swallowed my resentment and accepted my role because I thought it was the price of peace. But it hadn't bought me peace. It had bought their contempt. They saw my responsibility not as a strength but as a weakness to be exploited. Josh's text message proved it. She never reads her statements, don't worry. They thought I was a fool. Anger returned, a slow, burning fire in my gut. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger from before, but a steady, hardening flame. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to find out how wrong they were. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through my window, I knew they would be coming. Their dream vacation would be a pile of ashes by now, and they would be coming for the person who had set the fire. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and put on a pot of coffee. I was going to need it. The first light of dawn had barely broken through the morning haze when the sound started. It wasn't a knock. It was a furious, percussive banging that vibrated through my apartment door, rattling the frame. Bangs, bangs, bang. It was accompanied by my mother's voice, sharp and shrill with rage. Olivia, open this door. Olivia, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I had been waiting for them. After my call with the bank, I had sat in my living room, watching the sky change color, mentally preparing myself for this exact moment. I had imagined this scene playing out a dozen different ways. And yet, the sheer violence of the sound still sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. My heart, which had been beating with a slow, steady rhythm of resolve, began to hammer against my ribs. I walked out of my kitchen, my fresh cup of coffee in hand, and stood in my entryway, just listening. Bangs, bangs, bang. Now my father's voice joined in, a low, guttural roar. Olivia, so help me if you don't open this door. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was hot and black. It steadied me. This was not the time for fear. This was the time for confrontation. I had spent my entire life shrinking to make them comfortable. That was over. I placed my coffee mug on the small table by the door and walked to the peephole. The distorted fisheye view showed a scene of pure fury. My mother's face was twisted into a mask of indignation, her cheeks blotchy and red. My father stood behind her, his big frame radiating menace, his fists clenched at his sides. And behind them both, peeking over my father's shoulder, was Josh. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. His eyes were wide, and he looked like a cornered animal. He was the one who had lit the fuse with his careless text message. And now, he was hiding behind the very people he'd implicated. They looked pathetic, all three of them. Their entitlement had curdled into a desperate, ugly rage. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here to explain. They were here to demand, to intimidate, to bully me into reversing what I had done. They had driven here at the crack of dawn, not with shame, but with fury that their grand heist had been foiled. I took a deep, centering breath. I smoothed down the front of my simple gray t-shirt. I was in my home, my sanctuary. They were the ones who had crossed a line. They were the ones who had committed a crime. I held all the power here, and for the first time in my life, I was going to use it. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click was loud in the sudden silence that fell on the other side of the door. They had stopped banging, holding their breath in anticipation. I turned the handle and pulled the door inward, but only part of the way. I stood firm in the opening, my body language a clear barrier. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them, my expression carefully neutral. The sight that greeted me was even more jarring up close. My mother's hair was a mess, as if she'd thrown on her clothes and run out of the house. My father's eyes were bloodshot. They looked like common criminals, caught in the act and furious about it. The vacation they had felt so entitled to, the luxurious suites and private drivers of Mykonos, had been replaced by the drab, beige hallway of my apartment building at 6 o'clock in the morning. My mother found her voice first. It was not the soft, wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. It was a venomous hiss. "What did you do?" she snarled, her eyes boring into me. "What did you do?" I saw it all in that moment. The complete absence of remorse. The absolute conviction that they were the victims here. I saw my entire childhood of being overlooked, of being used, of being the family ATM, culminating in this ugly, desperate scene. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The last vestiges of familial obligation, of daughterly duty, turned to dust. I met my mother's gaze without flinching. I looked past her to my father's angry face, and then to my brother's terrified one. I had been preparing for this my whole life. I opened my mouth to speak, and the voice that came out was not the voice of their quiet, accommodating daughter. It was the voice of a woman who had finally had enough. "What did I do?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. That's a very interesting question to start with, Mom. They tried to push past me, to bring their storm of anger into my home, but I held my ground, my hand firmly on the edge of the door. We're not doing this in my apartment. We can talk right here. Don't you take that tone with me, my father boomed, stepping forward. You have ruined everything, everything. What exactly have I ruined? I asked, my eyes locking with his. A vacation. A vacation that you plan to take by stealing from your own daughter. The word stealing hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. My mother flinched as if I'd struck her. We did not steal, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet hallway. A neighbor's door cracked open down the hall, then quickly shut. It was your money, yes, but you have so much of it. You work on your little computer all day, you wouldn't have even missed it. It was for the family. For the family, I let out a short, bitter laugh. Was it for the family when I had to work all summer to buy a clunker of a car while you bought Josh a brand new one? Was it for the family when you drained the college fund on his failed business ideas and I had to take out thousands in loans? This wasn't for the family. This was for him, I said, flicking my gaze to Josh, who shrank back. And for you, it was never for me. We sacrificed for you your entire life, my father yelled, his face turning a deep shade of red. We put a roof over your head, we fed you. You did what parents are legally required to do, I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. Providing the bare minimum doesn't entitle you to my life savings. Sacrifices? Tell me about the sacrifices. Tell me about how you sacrificed my financial security to pay for Josh's car. Tell me about how you've borrowed thousands of dollars from me over the years for emergencies that were never paid back. Were those new golf clubs an emergency, Dad? Was that weekend spa trip an emergency, Mom? They stared at me, momentarily speechless. They had never heard me talk like this. I had always been the one to back down, to smooth things over. They didn't know how to handle this version of Olivia. Josh finally found his voice, a pathetic whine. You got my text. You did this on purpose to hurt us. I turned my full attention to him. Your text? You mean the one where you told Mom not to worry because I'm too stupid and unobservant to read my own bank statements? That text? No, Josh, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to protect myself. From you, from all of why. No. I pulled my phone from my pocket. And just so we're clear on how this happened, I held up the phone, displaying the screenshot of his message. His face went pale. My mother rushed to his defense, a lioness protecting her favored cub. He didn't mean it like that. He was just excited about the trip. You're twisting his words. There is no other way to twist. She never reads her statements. Don't worry, Mom, I said flatly. It's not a poem. It's an admission of guilt. It's evidence. The word evidence changed the atmosphere. The raw anger in my father's eyes was now tinged with a flicker of fear. What do you mean evidence? He asked, his voice lower now. I mean that when I saw a fraudulent charge for $14,750 on my account, I did what any responsible adult would do. I called my bank's fraud department, I explained slowly, as if to a child. I told them I did not authorize the transaction. They opened a full investigation. They asked me if I knew who might have done it. I told them. The color drained from my mother's face. Olivia, no, you wouldn't. I would, and I did, I said, my voice like ice. I told them I suspected my mother, Carol, my father, Richard, and my brother, Josh. The travel company has been notified that the charge was fraudulent. The tickets booked in my name are void. The transaction is being investigated. For fraud. That's a crime, in case you've forgotten. Silence. The weight of my words finally landed. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. I had escalated it. I had involved outsiders, authorities. I had turned their secret, shameful act into an official record. My mother's tactic shifted instantly from rage to melodrama. Her face crumpled, and huge, theatrical tears began to stream down her cheeks. How could you do this to your own family? She sobbed, reaching for my arm. I pulled away. After everything I've done for you, I gave you life. And you've been charging me for it ever since, I said, my heart a cold, hard knot. Her tears didn't move me. I had seen them too many times. They were a tool, a weapon she used to get her way. You feel entitled to the fruits of my labor because you're my parents. But that's not how it works. A child doesn't owe their parents their future. My success is not your retirement plan. My savings are not your vacation fund. So that's it, my father said, his voice a low growl of disbelief. You're just going to throw your family away over some money. Some money, it's $15,000. And it's not about the money anymore, I said, my voice shaking with the force of my conviction. It's about the trust. It's about the fact that the three people in the world who are supposed to protect me colluded to rob me and thought they could get away with it. You didn't just try to steal my money. You tried to steal my dignity. You bet on me being a pushover. You lost. I looked at each of them one by one. My weeping mother, my thunderstruck father, my terrified brother. The spell was broken. I no longer saw them as my family. I saw them as what they were, manipulative, entitled, and utterly unapologetic. I want you to leave now, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more authority than any shout. We're not going anywhere, my father challenged. We're going to fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied calmly. I raised my phone again. You have 60 seconds to walk away from my door. If you are still here when that minute is up, the next call I make will be to the police to have you removed for trespassing. His eyes widened. He knew I meant it. The fight went out of him, replaced by a look of utter defeat. My mother's sobs hitched. Josh looked like he was about to be sick. For a long moment, nobody moved. It was a silent battle of wills. Then, slowly, my father turned. He grabbed my mother's arm. Carol, let's go. But Richard, she started. Now, he barked. He pulled her with him, and Josh scurried after them like a frightened child. They didn't look back. I watched them retreat down the hallway until they disappeared into the elevator. I slowly closed my door, the soft click echoing in the profound silence. I leaned my back against it, my legs trembling. I slid down to the floor, my whole body shaking with the adrenaline of the confrontation. I had done it. I had finally, truly stood up for myself. The war was over, and I had won. In the silence of my apartment, the aftermath of the storm washed over me. I expected to feel a deep, gut-wrenching sadness, the sorrow of a family irrevocably broken. But as I sat there on the floor, my back against the door that had become my fortress, the feeling that bloomed in my chest was not grief. It was an overwhelming, breathtaking sense of relief. It felt as if a physical weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. The constant, low-grade anxiety of waiting for the next financial demand, the vi obligation of managing their expectations, the quiet resentment, it was all gone. All that remained was silence. And freedom. I blocked their numbers that morning. All three of them. I didn't want the inevitable barrage of guilt-tripping texts or angry voicemails. I needed to create a space for myself that was free of their influence, a quarantine from their toxicity. The next few days were quiet. A case manager from the bank's fraud department called, just as Maria had promised. He was kind and efficient. He confirmed the charge had been fully reversed and the investigation was proceeding. He asked if I wanted to press charges. It was a question that gave me pause. Sending my own parents to court felt like a step too far, a kind of vengeance I wasn't interested in. No, I told him. I don't want to press charges. I just want the money returned, and for them to understand that there are consequences. I think the investigation itself is consequence enough. My goal wasn't to ruin their lives, but to reclaim my own. The point had been made. A week later, a letter arrived. It was from my mother. I recognized her looping, dramatic handwriting immediately. I held it in my hands for a long time, debating whether to even open it. I was tempted to just throw it away, to sever the last possible line of communication. But curiosity won. The letter was not an apology. It was 4 pages of justifications, accusations, and self-pity. She wrote about how hard their lives had been, how much they had given up for their children. She accused me of being cold, ungrateful, and unforgiving. She claimed I had always been jealous of Josh's free spirit. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, a final, desperate attempt to reframe the narrative and cast herself as the victim. There was not one sentence that acknowledged their wrongdoing, not one word of remorse. Reading it was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't a relationship that could be fixed with a simple apology. The foundation was rotten to the core. I folded the letter, slid it back into its envelope, and dropped it into my shredder. I watched the thin strips of paper fall like confetti, the physical manifestation of my final goodbye. I started seeing a therapist. I needed to unpack 28 years of conditioning to understand how I had allowed myself to become so enmeshed in their dysfunction. We talked about boundaries, about the difference between kindness and self-sacrifice, and about the golden child and scapegoat dynamic that had defined my life. It was difficult work, but with each session, I felt stronger, clearer. I was learning to reparent myself, to give myself the validation and support I had never received from them. About a month after the confrontation, I was sitting at my desk, wrapping up my work for the day. I checked my bank accounts, a habit I had adopted since the incident. I looked at the balance in my new secure savings account. The $14,750 was back in its rightful place, a silent testament to my victory. It was my money, my security, my future. On a whim, I opened a new tab in my browser and typed in the name of a travel website. I didn't search for flights to Mykonos. The name was tainted for me now, a symbol of their greed and deceit. Instead, I browsed destinations I had always dreamed of seeing. The mountains of New Zealand, the historic cities of Japan, the rainforests of Costa Rica. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. I wasn't running away from anything. I was running towards something, towards a life of my own making on my own terms. I clicked on a link for a 2-week trekking tour through Patagonia. The pictures were stunning, jagged, snow-capped peaks, impossibly blue glacial lakes, and wide-open, empty landscapes. It looked like the most peaceful place on Earth. I thought about my parents and Josh. I had no idea what they were doing. I assumed they were back to their old lives, perhaps complaining to anyone who would listen about their ungrateful, monstrous daughter. It no longer mattered. They were a part of my past, a closed chapter in a book I was still writing. With a deep sense of peace and a thrum of excitement, I selected my dates and clicked Book Now. I paid for it with my own money, from an account that was truly and completely my own. This trip wasn't an escape, it was a beginning. So I have to ask you, the listener, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them as I did? Would you have tried to forgive them and repair the relationship, or would you have cut them off completely? It's easy to judge from the outside, but when it's your own family, the lines between right and wrong can feel so blurred.